It winds its way across 800 miles of the Great Alaska Wilderness, and the path it traced 40 years ago pointed the last frontier to a new, more prosperous future.
There are few things in Alaska's history that equal the magnitude of the impact of the pipeline. The money that it brought in was unimaginable.
It was controversial and embattled at the start, but now even some of the strongest opponents from years ago praise its track record.
Considering the magnitude of the project and the rocky start that it got originally, I think it has done very well.
Despite new technical challenges, the people who run the pipeline are fueled by optimism.
There's a lot of good news stories. We're getting more and more oil into the system.
And there is great pride about the 40th anniversary. The first sections of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline were laid in March of 1975. The final weld was completed just 2 years later. It had to cross 3 mountain ranges and 30 major rivers and streams.
Welcome. I'd like to introduce you to my museum. Normally 25 cents admission fee, but for you folks, we'll give you a special deal.
Dave Haugen was there from the very beginning. His home office is decorated with pipeline memories.
Just as one of my mementos I keep treasured to this day is this particular old flannel shirt right here, because here I am, 1975, during the original construction at Delta Camp. And as you can tell, a little bit younger, a little bit more hair, and not so much white hair as now.
Back in 1970, Dave was one of the surveyors who laid out the route for the pipeline from the Yukon River to Valdez. Dave became a project manager and tackled some big challenges, like the pipeline bridge over the Tanana River.
The entire project was monumental. For those of us that were on it, we knew that when we were doing the project that it was going to have historical significance.
And the costs were also historic. The original construction estimate, $900 million, but the final price tag climbed to $8 billion, or $32 billion in today's dollars, the largest privately funded construction project in history at that time. And it would take 70,000 people to make it happen.
Good memories, a lot of work, very tiring. 15, 16-hour days pouring concrete.
Scott Harder signed on as a construction laborer in 1975.
This was my crew in the pipe.
That's cool.
Well, I signed on because it was pretty good money. And I also got to travel around the state and see some places that I hadn't been before. 40 years, it's just, it's impressive. Every time I drive down the Richardson Highway and I see the pipeline, it's, you know, it's a sense of pride that I was involved in building that, and it's still pumping oil and still helping Alaska and the United States.
Current weather at Chandelar. Temperature is 0.
Pipeline workers lived in remote camps up and down the construction route. Clara King left her home in Houston, Texas to work on the pipeline. Clara says she'll never forget the day she arrived.
And we landed at Franklin Bluffs. It was 69 below and ice fog. Wow. And when we got off the plane to walk over to the camp, 6 people got back on the plane and said, "I'm not staying here."
People like Clara King, Scott Harder, and Dave Haugen, and thousands of others were pipeline pioneers. And at the end of the pipeline in Valdez, there's a monument to the construction workers that carries their motto, "We didn't know it couldn't be done." It's a testament to the people who 40 years ago did what many thought was impossible. They built a project that helped build the Alaska we know today. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline depends on heat to keep the oil flowing, but engineers are now fighting a cold war to keep the pipeline from plugging up. There's a battle going on at Pump Station 9 near Delta Junction.
So we're entering the manifold building.
And this is the war room. Pump Station Supervisor Wes Wilson takes us behind the scenes to a place that is extremely rare for visitors to see, where even most pipeline employees can't go.
We're walking into the main manifold section. We're seeing the launcher and receiver.
Around the corner is where one of the most hazardous jobs in the pipeline system takes place, a dirty, dangerous procedure that has become crucial as the amount of oil flowing through the line has dropped.
This is the launcher for our pigs that we send to Valdez every 7 days.
And this is their battle-tested weapon, keeping the pipeline from getting plugged up. It's called a pig, a cleaning device that's about the size of a compact car. They're launched into the pipeline, get pushed along by the oil flow, while scraping out wax that naturally occurs in the oil when it comes out of the ground.
If you didn't do this, what would happen to the pipeline?
If you didn't do this, eventually over time you would start to build up a larger and larger layer.
That black stuff on the pig, that's the wax that's scraped out of the pipeline, and this is only a very small portion of what gets pushed out.
It's a very dirty job to begin with. Our last pig pull that we had, we recovered 9 barrels of wax from that. That's about 1,600 pounds, and that's fairly typical.
But about a year ago, something happened that was anything but typical. When they opened the hatch, they couldn't see the cleaning pig at all. It was being blocked behind a giant solid plug of wax.
71 barrels on that one. It took us about 4 days. We had to bring in additional resources to do it.
And it's tough, dangerous work. Crews must use spark-proof shovels to dig out the wax, because one spark could trigger an explosion. The equipment used to control the Trans-Alaska Pipeline when it came online 40 years ago would be considered technological antiques today. There have been some big changes and big debate about automation that's now being used to keep the oil flowing and to prevent a potentially disastrous oil spill. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline stretches from one end of Alaska to the other, 800 miles of 48-inch diameter steel pipe.
Hey, Ryan 1 is 10.
Copy that, thank you.
So you might be surprised to learn this massive pipeline is controlled from one relatively small room hundreds of miles away. It's here in Anchorage. We wanted to see how it all works, and we were granted rare behind-the-scenes access to the electronic heart of the entire Trans-Alaska Pipeline system. It's in a highly restricted building, so much so we were asked to not disclose its exact location because of security concerns.
Are you going to start walking up now? It looks like you're stabilized.
From just 3 monitoring stations, a handful of operators watch and control the entire pipeline around the clock with mouse clicks. It's the last stop for oil that flows through the Trans-Alaska Pipeline before heading to refineries in the lower 48. The Valdez Marine Terminal plays a big role in this system in a very big way. It's perched high above Valdez Harbor on a site blasted out of the mountainside.
It's actually almost 1,000 acres, the size of this, the area of the facility here.
And that's what grabbed our attention as we went behind the scenes at the Valdez Marine Terminal. Everything here is huge.
Typical tank is 60 feet tall, 250 feet across. They'll hold 550,000 barrels.
And there are 14 of them in use today. They can hold more than 7 million barrels of oil. That's enough to fill 445 Olympic-sized swimming pools. From the water to the very top, the terminal rises 660 feet above sea level. That's the height of a 60-story building. Down below, the docks where the tankers load. The largest can hold 2 million barrels. The whole complex is so big it has its own power plant that uses oil vapors from the big tanks for fuel. From the new generation of engineers.
In this location we have 3 different taps. We have one tap off the top of the pipe.
Figuring out ways to keep the pipeline working. To the pipeline pioneers who overcame amazing obstacles 40 years ago to build it.
I'm glad it's still running at 40 years. I hope it's got another 40 years left in it or more.
Much more than oil flows through the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. For them, it also carries their collective sense of pride in being part of a massive project that some thought couldn't be built, that energized the state's economy and built the personal futures and fortunes of countless Alaskans. At 40 years and still going, it's Alaska's pipe dream come true. As we mentioned earlier, the motto of the people who built the pipeline was, "We didn't know it couldn't be done." As the pipeline reaches its 40th anniversary, that spirit of determination flows on. Thanks for joining us.